The NBA world just woke up, and nobody saw this coming. The Los Angeles Lakers, one of the most storied franchises in the history of professional basketball, just pulled the trigger on a trade that has everybody talking. And not just talking, arguing, debating, losing sleep over it. Because this move tells you everything about where the Lakers are headed. Everything about what they believe. And everything about how they plan to compete for a championship. The name is Walker Kessler. And if you don't know who that is yet, buckle up. Because by the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly why the Lakers made this trade, why it might just be the smartest thing they've done in years, and why this big, quiet, shot-blocking machine from Utah might be the missing piece that turns this Lakers team from a pretender into a genuine title contender. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Let's talk about the problem. Because every great trade starts with a problem. And the Lakers have had one specific problem for years now, a problem so obvious, so glaring, so painful to watch, that fans in purple and gold have been screaming about it from their couches, their cars, their barbershops, and their group chats for what feels like forever. The Lakers couldn't protect the rim. It sounds simple when you say it out loud. But the implications of that simple sentence run deep. They run through every playoff loss, every fourth-quarter collapse, every moment where an opposing big man just waltzed right into the paint, rose up, and dropped the ball through the hoop while the Lakers stood there and watched. It runs through every series where teams attacked the paint relentlessly because they absolutely knew, that there was nobody back there to stop them. Think about what rim protection actually means in the modern NBA. Think about what it does for a team. When you have a real, certified, terrifying shot blocker standing in the lane, everything changes. Everything. Opposing guards start hesitating when they attack. Wing players think twice before driving. Big men can't just come down the lane and dunk on you at will. A great rim protector doesn't just block shots, he changes shots. He makes players shoot early. He makes them adjust their angles. He forces them to pull up on mid-range jumpers they don't want to take. He creates doubt. And doubt, in basketball, is a weapon more powerful than almost anything else. The Lakers, for all their star power, for all their history, for all the purple and gold banners hanging in Crypto.com arena, have been playing without that weapon for far too long. And this is the story of how they finally got it. Let's go back to the 2022 NBA draft. The Utah Jazz are on the clock. Now, the Jazz at this point are in a fascinating position. They've made a bold decision. They're blowing up their Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert era and going into a full-scale rebuild. They're accumulating picks, accumulating young players, and they're betting on the future. And in the 2022 draft, with the 22nd overall pick, they select a 7-foot center out of Auburn University. Walker Kessler. Now, at the time, most people outside of college basketball circles didn't really know the name. He wasn't a consensus top 10 pick. He wasn't the guy on the cover of every mock draft. But the people who watched him play at Auburn, and especially the people who watched him in his final college season, knew something special was happening with this kid. In his sophomore year at Auburn, Walker Kessler was absolutely dominant. And I don't mean he had a couple of good games. I mean he was a force of nature on the defensive end in a way that college basketball hadn't seen in years. He averaged over 4 blocks per game. That number is almost absurd when you think about it. There are NBA players who go entire seasons without accumulating the blocks that Kessler was putting up in individual college games. But here's what made him different from just a shot-blocking novelty act. He wasn't just standing under the basket waving his arms and hoping the ball came to him. He was reading plays. He was timing jumps. He was understanding angles and trajectories. He was making basketball decisions, sophisticated, intelligent, experienced basketball decisions, in the body of a 22-year-old kid. That's rare. That's genuinely rare. So Utah takes him. And what happens next? The Jazz give him time. They let him develop. They don't rush him. They don't ask him to be something he isn't. They put him on the floor and say, "Go be yourself. Go do what you do." And Walker Kessler takes everything they give him and turns it into something that the entire league eventually has to sit up and take notice of. In his rookie season with Utah, the flashes are there. You can see the potential. You can see what this guy is going to be. But it's in his second year, his third year, that the picture really starts to come into focus. Let's talk about the numbers, because the numbers tell the story better than anything else. Walker Kessler, over the course of his time with the Jazz, establishes himself as one of, and I want to be careful with this because it's a bold statement, but it's accurate, one of the most impactful defensive centers in the entire NBA. Not for a young player. Not just for his age. For the entire league. He's putting up block numbers that most players in the history of the game haven't matched. He's leading the league in certain defensive metrics. Advanced analytics people are going absolutely wild over his numbers because they're seeing things in his defensive impact that the eye test alone can't fully capture. His block rate is off the charts. His defensive rating, meaning how many points the opposing team scores per 100 possessions when he's on the floor, is elite. His pick-and-roll defense is special. And his ability to protect the rim without fouling, which is something a lot of shot blockers struggle with, is something that coaches around the league dream about. Because here's the thing about shot blockers who foul too much, they're actually harmful. If your rim protector is sending guys to the free throw line every time he tries to block a shot, then you've replaced one problem with another. The fouls take him off the floor. The free throws add up on the scoreboard. And the team ends up worse than if they just let the shot go. Kessler doesn't have that problem. He has the timing. He has the discipline. He blocks shots clean. He pins them against the backboard. He swats them out of bounds. But it's in his second year, his third year, that the picture really starts to come into focus. Let's talk about the numbers, because the numbers tell the story better than anything else. Walker Kessler, over the course of his time with the Jazz, establishes himself as one of, and I want to be careful with this because it's a bold statement, but it's accurate, one of the most impactful defensive centers in the entire NBA. Not for a young player. Not just for his age. For the entire league. He's putting up block numbers that most players in the history of the game haven't matched. He's leading the league in certain defensive metrics. Advanced analytics people are going absolutely wild over his numbers because they're seeing things in his defensive impact that the eye test alone can't fully capture. His block rate is off the charts. His defensive rating, meaning how many points the opposing team scores per 100 possessions when he's on the floor, is elite. His pick-and-roll defense is special. And his ability to protect the rim without fouling, which is something a lot of shot blockers struggle with, is something that coaches around the league dream about. Because here's the thing about shot blockers who foul too much, they're actually harmful. If your rim protector is sending guys to the free throw line every time he tries to block a shot, then you've replaced one problem with another. The fouls take him off the floor. The free throws add up on the scoreboard. And the team ends up worse than if they just let the shot go. Kessler doesn't have that problem. He has the timing. He has the discipline. He blocks shots clean. He pins them against the backboard. He swats them out of bounds. He rejects attempts before they even get started because the player sees him coming and decides not to even try. That last part, that's the real value. The shots that never happen. The drives that get pulled up. The lobs that don't get thrown because the quarterback looks at Kessler and says, "I'm not doing that." Now let's get into the Lakers side of this story. Because to understand why they traded for Kessler, you have to understand what their roster has looked like and where the gaps were. The Lakers, coming into this period, had LeBron James. Yes, the king. Still playing at an extraordinary level, still doing things that make you shake your head in disbelief, still defying everything we thought we knew about how long a basketball player could sustain excellence. LeBron, at this point in his career, has seen everything. He knows everything. He understands the game at a level that very few players in history have ever reached. And because of that, LeBron knows exactly what a team needs to win a championship. He's won 4 of them. He knows the formula. And the Lakers had Anthony Davis. Now, Anthony Davis is one of the most talented players on the planet. When he's locked in, when he's healthy, when he's engaged on both ends of the floor, there is almost nothing you can do to stop him. He can score inside, outside, in the mid-range, at the free throw line. He can defend multiple positions. He can guard centers, he can guard small forwards, he can switch onto guards. He's a generational talent. But here's the thing about Anthony Davis that the Lakers have had to grapple with for years. He can't do it alone. He needs help. He needs a running mate on the defensive end who can take some of the load off him. When Davis has to be the only source of rim protection, when every play runs through him defensively, it wears him down. It puts him in foul trouble. It forces him into positions where he has to make impossible choices. Do I stay home and let the driver score, or do I rotate and leave my man open? Those are the choices that exhaust a player over the course of a long season and, more importantly, over the course of a long playoff run. The Lakers, for years, tried to paper over this problem with different solutions. They brought in various veterans. They experimented with different lineups. They tried playing smaller. They tried playing bigger. They shuffled their roster in search of the right combination that would give them both the offensive firepower to compete and the defensive backbone to hold up when the games got tight. None of it worked. Not really. Not at the level you need in the Western Conference, where you're going up against teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Denver Nuggets, the Golden State Warriors, the Phoenix Suns, teams that have elite personnel, elite systems, and the ability to expose any weakness in your defensive structure. The Western Conference, in the modern era, is not forgiving. It does not reward teams that have one big defensive weakness and hope nobody notices. Opposing coaches, the smart ones, the great ones, they spend entire practice sessions game planning specifically to attack your weaknesses. If you can't protect the rim, they will attack the rim. All night. Every night. In the regular season and, more importantly, in the playoffs, when the games slow down, when the sets get more sophisticated, when it becomes a chess match between two coaching staffs trying to find every possible edge. The Lakers needed a rim protector. They knew it. Everyone knew it. The question was, who? And when? And at what cost? Enter the Utah Jazz. Now, the Jazz, as we talked about, are in rebuild mode. But they're not in the kind of rebuild mode where they're just losing games and crying about it. They're in the kind of rebuild mode where they're actively, aggressively, intelligently constructing a future. They have Lauri Markkanen. They have young pieces. They have draft picks. They have options. And as they start to look at their roster and their timeline, they start to have a conversation that front offices around the league have all the time. Which of our assets makes sense to move? Walker Kessler, as brilliant as he is defensively, represents a certain kind of player, a player whose value is almost entirely driven by his impact in a specific context. In Utah, in the middle of a rebuild, surrounded by young players still figuring out their games, the full scope of what Kessler can do is being somewhat obscured. His greatness is real. But the Jazz aren't winning championships anytime soon, and Kessler is a player who could be doing something meaningful, something important, in a winning environment. The Jazz front office, and credit to them, because they're a smart, forward-thinking operation, starts having conversations around the league. And the Lakers, who have been searching for exactly what Kessler offers, come calling. Now, trades in the NBA are never simple. They're never just, here's the player, here's the money, done. There are contract considerations, there are draft pick implications, there are salary cap rules that could fill a law school textbook, there are second aprons and luxury tax lines and all sorts of financial machinery that operates in the background while the basketball conversation is happening in the foreground. The people making these deals are working through layers of complexity simultaneously: basketball value, financial value, timeline value, asset value, and trying to find a deal that makes sense for both teams. The Lakers and Jazz work something out. The details of the trade, the players moving, the picks changing hands, matter in terms of the business of basketball. But what matters most for this story is the result. Walker Kessler becomes a Laker. And the moment that happens, something shifts in the conversation around this team. Because this isn't just addition by addition. This is addition that creates multiplication. Let me explain what I mean. When you add a player to a team, the simple version of the math is, your team gets better by whatever that player brings. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, adding the right player at the right position does something more profound. It unlocks the other players around him. It allows them to do things they couldn't do before. It changes the entire tactical picture. That's what Walker Kessler does for the Lakers. Think about Anthony Davis. Think about what Davis's game looks like when he doesn't have to be the last line of defense on every single possession. When Davis knows that Kessler is back there, that 7-foot, long-armed, block-happy presence standing at the rim, he's free. He's free to be more aggressive on the offensive end because he doesn't have to preserve himself defensively. He's free to take more risks on the perimeter, to gamble for steals, to be the disruptive force he can be, because he knows if he gambles and gets beaten, Kessler is the safety net. Davis, unleashed, is one of the most terrifying offensive players in the NBA. If Kessler's presence gives Davis even 10 or 15 more percentage points of freedom, if it means Davis is less conservative, less tentative, more willing to impose his will, then the offensive output you get from that number 2 option on the Lakers goes through the roof. And then think about LeBron. LeBron at this stage of his career is smarter than he's ever been. He's playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. He's making decisions on the fly that are 3 steps ahead of what most people even see. And one of the most important decisions a player like LeBron makes on every possession is, do I help defensively or do I stay home? Do I rotate to the rim or do I guard my man? These decisions are about energy management as much as they're about basketball IQ. When you have a center who you can actually trust to guard the rim, and not just guard it, but punish anyone who comes near it, LeBron's decision-making becomes cleaner. He doesn't have to rotate as much. He doesn't have to gamble as much. He can be in the right place, do the right thing, and conserve energy for the offensive end where he still has the capacity to be an absolute nightmare for opposing defenses. This matters in March. It matters in April. It matters in May and June, when the playoffs are happening and the games get longer and the possessions get harder and every single decision has consequence. But we're not done. Because there's another element of Kessler's game that doesn't get nearly enough attention when people talk about him, his ability to run the pick and roll. Now, we talk about Kessler as a defender. And rightfully so, because that's the headline, that's the marquee attribute, that's the thing that makes you sit up straight in your chair. But Walker Kessler as a pick-and-roll partner? As a lob threat? As a finisher around the basket? That's a legitimate offensive weapon. And when you put him next to LeBron James, one of the greatest pick-and-roll initiators in basketball history, you're suddenly talking about a combination that opposing defenses are going to lose sleep over. LeBron running the pick-and-roll with a mobile, athletic, lob-catching 7-footer who can finish with either hand, who can catch in traffic, who has soft hands and good feet, that's a problem. That's a genuine, serious problem for opposing teams. You can't go under the screen because LeBron will shoot you dead from 3. You can't go over the screen and try to stay with LeBron because Kessler will roll to the rim and catch the lob for 2. You can't switch because if your guard ends up on Kessler at the basket, LeBron is licking his chops. And if your big ends up on LeBron at the top of the key, good luck. It's the kind of 2-man game that championship teams are built around. It's the kind of combination that, once it gets going, once it gets in rhythm, becomes almost impossible to stop without making a tactical concession somewhere else on the floor that creates another problem. Now let's talk about the youth factor. Because this is actually something that gets overlooked in the Lakers-Kessler conversation, and it might be the most important long-term element of the whole trade. Walker Kessler is young. Genuinely young. Not young by NBA veteran standards, young. Actually young. We're talking about a player who is still in the early chapters of his professional career. And here's what that means for the Lakers. They're not just getting what Kessler is right now. They're getting what Kessler is going to become. Because here's what every legitimate scout, every serious analyst, everyone who has watched Walker Kessler closely over his time in the NBA will tell you. This guy is not finished growing as a player. He is not the finished product. His defensive skills are already elite. But his offensive game, his ability to operate in pick-and-pop situations, his mid-range shooting, because yes, some modern centers are developing mid-range games, his ability to make decisions as a passer out of the post, all of that is still developing. You know what happens when a player who is already elite at one end of the floor starts getting better at the other end? You know what happens when a defensive anchor who strikes terror in the hearts of opposing big men also becomes a reliable 15-point-per-game scorer? He goes from being a great player to being an absolutely essential, unguardable, franchise-altering force. The Lakers aren't just building for right now. They're building for a window that extends beyond this season, beyond next season, into a future where they can continue competing even as rosters around the league evolve and change. Kessler gives them that. He gives them a player who will still be in his prime when LeBron has eventually hung up his sneakers. He gives them a cornerstone they can build around, a player who can be the foundation of the next chapter of Lakers basketball. And that matters. That really, genuinely matters. Because the teams that stay relevant in this league, the teams that don't go through brutal 5-year rebuilds every time a star retires, are the teams that always have something to build around. The teams that always have a foundational piece in place that new stars can come join. Think about the history of the Lakers themselves. This franchise has stayed relevant across decades precisely because of this principle. They've always had something. From Kareem to James Worthy to Shaq to Kobe to Pau Gasol to LeBron, there's always been a piece in place that the next chapter could be built around. Walker Kessler, potentially, becomes that piece for the post-LeBron era. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's bring it back to right now. Let's talk about what this does for the Lakers in the immediate term. The Western Conference, as of this moment, is loaded. It is absolutely stacked with talent. The Oklahoma City Thunder have been building something remarkable with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a collection of young, hungry, talented players who play with the kind of energy and purpose that's terrifying. The Denver Nuggets still have Nikola Jokic, the most dominant center of his generation, a player who can dismantle any team in the league when he's operating at full capacity. The Golden State Warriors, you never count out Golden State, you just never do. They know how to win, they know how to compete, they have the experience of multiple championships informing every decision they make. And the Phoenix Suns, and the Sacramento Kings, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, everywhere you look in the West, there are teams with real talent, real depth, and real ambition. Nobody is going to hand the Lakers anything. Nobody is going to step aside and say, you know what, this is your year, go ahead. You have to earn it. Every series, every round, every game. The difference between a team that earns it and a team that doesn't often comes down to one or two specific matchups that you either win or lose. And one of the most important matchups in the modern NBA, especially in the playoffs, is the big man battle. Is your center better than their center? Can your rim protector handle their best big man? Can your interior presence anchor your defense when the game slows down and everything becomes about execution? The Lakers, before this trade, had real questions at that position. Legitimate, serious questions that opposing coaches were circling on their game plans. No. With Walker Kessler in the middle, those questions look very different. Let's get specific. Let's talk about specific playoff scenarios. Because this is where the real value of a player like Kessler becomes undeniable. Imagine the Lakers in the playoffs against a team like Denver. Nikola Jokic, the greatest passing center in basketball history. A player who can get his points not just by scoring them himself, but by reading the entire defense and finding the open man in places nobody else can even see. Teams have tried to stop Jokic with single coverage. They've tried double teams. They've tried switching. They've tried zone. None of it works perfectly because Jokic is just too smart, too skilled, too experienced in dismantling every defensive strategy you throw at him. But here's what makes it harder to guard Jokic. When he knows that if he passes out of the post, the guy receiving the pass can attack a weak rim protector. When he knows that his teammates can drive and finish at the basket without consequence. When he can use the threat of his teammates' attacks to get himself better opportunities. Walker Kessler changes that equation. Kessler at the rim means that when Jokic passes to a cutter, the cutter is looking at a wall. When a Nugget guard drives in transition, Kessler is there. When they try to run any action that ends with someone attacking the basket, Kessler is the answer. And because Jokic is brilliant, he'll adjust, but every adjustment he makes opens something else up. Rim protection doesn't make Jokic beatable, but it makes him work harder. And working harder means something in a 7-game series. Now imagine the Lakers against OKC and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. SGA is one of the most gifted isolation scorers in the game. He gets to his spots. He creates his own offense. He has the handle, the footwork, the creativity at the rim to finish through contact and over defenders. He's going to score his points. You know that. The question is, can you limit the easy ones? Can you make him work for every basket instead of getting layups and dunks at will? A great rim protector changes what Shai can do in the paint. Not eliminates it. Shai is too good for that. But changes it. Makes the baseline drive a little riskier. Makes the left side attack a little less automatic. Makes every possession where he decides to use his blow-by speed to get into the paint a potential shot block. And potential shot blocks become shot block hesitations. And shot block hesitations become pull-up jumpers. And pull-up jumpers, instead of dunks, is a massive win for the defense over the course of a series. This is the strategic depth of what Walker Kessler brings to the Lakers. It's not just about the blocked shots you see on SportsCenter. It's about all the shots that never happen. All the drives that get redirected. All the plays that get called off before they can even develop because the player with the ball looks at the paint and sees Kessler standing there like a 7-foot, long-armed reason not to do that. Let's go even deeper. Let's talk about what Kessler does to the Lakers' transition defense, because this is something that almost nobody is talking about, and it's potentially just as important as his half-court defensive impact. The Lakers, in their current form, play a style that involves a lot of pushing the pace with LeBron in control. LeBron in transition, finding open teammates, pushing before the defense is set, that's a core part of what they do. And it's great. It creates easy opportunities and it keeps the defense on their heels. But here's the thing about playing fast. When you get out in transition on offense and it doesn't work, the opponent can push right back. And if they push right back and you don't have someone who can get back and protect your basket, disaster. Kessler is an excellent transition defender. His length, his speed for a player his size, and most importantly his instincts allow him to be effective even when the game is moving fast. He can get back, he can position himself in the lane, and he can make players think twice about going up in transition. That's not a small thing. That's multiple possessions per game, possessions where the opponent gets back and expects an easy run out, suddenly becoming contested, difficult plays. Over the course of 82 regular season games, over the course of a 7-game playoff series, those possessions accumulate into something significant. Into a real margin of victory. Now, let's talk about the culture piece. Because basketball is a human sport, played by human beings, and the human element matters even when we're talking about X's and O's and analytics. Walker Kessler, by all accounts, is exactly the kind of player you want to add to a team that's trying to win. He's not coming in with drama. He's not coming in with demands. He's not coming in with an ego that needs to be managed or a personality that clashes with the stars. He's coming in as a professional. A guy who wants to win. A guy who understands his role, defend, protect the rim, be available for lobs and dunks, set screens, make the right pass, and who embraces that role rather than fighting against it. That matters on a team with LeBron James. LeBron, for everything that's been written and said about him over the course of his career, is someone who values winning above all else. He values players who do their jobs. He values players who make the right play. He values players who understand the moment and rise to meet it rather than shrinking from the pressure. Kessler is that guy. He's been in Utah, surrounded by other young players in a rebuilding environment, and he's been professional. He's been coachable. He's been committed to improving. Imagine what he looks like in an environment where the winning culture is already established, where LeBron is demanding the best from everyone around him, where there is genuine championship ambition fueling every single practice and every single game. Players elevate in the right environment. We've seen it 1,000 times in basketball history. Players who are good in one place become great in another because the environment pushes them, challenges them, demands more from them. Walker Kessler in a winning environment, with LeBron James setting the standard and Anthony Davis showing him what it looks like to be an elite two-way player, that is a recipe for genuine growth. For the kind of development that takes a very good player and turns him into an all-star. Let's talk about the offensive end more specifically, because I want to give Kessler his full due here. The narrative is defensive player, rim protector, shot blocker, and all of that is true. But the offensive element deserves more. In the pick and roll, we touched on this, but let's go deeper. Kessler's ability to roll hard, to create separation from his defender, to catch in traffic and finish, that's not just useful, it's genuinely threatening. And the threat that it creates opens up the entire half-court offense for the Lakers. Think about LeBron James with the ball at the top of the key, Kessler setting a screen on his defender. If the defense blitzes LeBron, sends 2 defenders at him to contain the dribble drive, Kessler is rolling to the rim against one defender, and that defender cannot stop both the lob and the potential drop pass to a cutter. The math doesn't work. The defense is outnumbered. If the defense switches, meaning the guard takes Kessler and the big takes LeBron, LeBron is now being guarded by a big man on the perimeter. LeBron against a big man on the perimeter is not a contest. That's a layup. That's a pull-up 3. That's a post-up on the wing. LeBron wins that every time. If the defense goes under the screen, trying to take away LeBron's drive, LeBron has been shooting threes at an efficient rate late in his career. Going under the screen is basically conceding an open 3 to one of the best players who ever lived. There is no good answer when LeBron and Kessler are running their two-man game and doing it efficiently. Every defensive answer creates a different problem. And that is what makes an offense genuinely hard to guard. Not that it has one thing it does well, but that every response to that thing opens something else up. Now let's get into the broader context of what the Lakers have been trying to do over the past few seasons. The organizational ambition, the personnel decisions, the path they've been trying to carve through one of the most competitive leagues in professional sports. The Lakers have been in an interesting position. They have a superstar in LeBron James who is, frankly, defying biology at this point. He is playing at an MVP level at an age when most players are thinking about retirement, when most players' bodies have given out, when most players' minds have drifted from the intensity that championship-level performance requires. LeBron is still here. Still doing it. Still demanding the best from everyone around him. But the window, as everyone acknowledges, is not infinite. LeBron himself has acknowledged this, in his own way, in the things he says publicly and in the urgency with which the Lakers operate. There is a clock ticking. Not because LeBron is going anywhere tomorrow, but because the laws of basketball, and the laws of physics, and the laws of time, apply to everyone eventually. And making the most of the LeBron era, maximizing every remaining year of his greatness, is an absolute organizational imperative. That imperative shapes every decision the Lakers make. Every trade. Every free agent signing. Every draft choice. Every lineup decision. It all filters through the question, does this make us better for a championship push right now? Walker Kessler is a resounding yes to that question. He makes them better right now. He fills the specific gap that has been hurting them in their biggest moments. He gives them a weapon they haven't had. And he gives them all of this while also being young enough to matter beyond the LeBron window. This is the kind of move that franchise-altering organizations make. Not just reacting to problems. Not just plugging holes with duct tape and hoping for the best. But making substantive, meaningful changes that address real weaknesses and create real new strengths. Let's think about what the locker room looks like now. Let's think about the players in that building and how they receive this addition. Anthony Davis sees a partner. A legitimate defensive partner who doesn't just say he'll help, he actually helps. He actually shows up, game after game, and protects the basket and changes what the offense can do. Davis, who has occasionally been asked to do too much defensively because there was nobody reliable behind him, now has a genuine safety net. That's psychologically freeing. That's physically freeing. That's the difference between a player who plays worried and a player who plays free. The guards on the Lakers, whoever they are, the perimeter players trying to make their living on the wing and at the three-point line, they see a big man they can trust. A center they can play aggression defense in front of, knowing that if their man beats them off the dribble, there's somebody back there. Having that trust changes how you play defense as a perimeter player. It changes your willingness to gamble, to take risks, to try to make plays. And when your perimeter players are making plays, deflections, steals, disruptive defensive moments, your entire team's defensive profile goes up. LeBron sees a chess piece. He sees a weapon he can deploy. He sees a player he can incorporate into his mind-blowing court vision, his ability to find the open man in the millisecond before the window closes. For LeBron, Kessler rolling to the rim is just another option, another dangerous, potentially scoring option that opposing defenses have to account for. And every additional option LeBron has is another way he can hurt you. Can you imagine LeBron, in his absolute genius as a playmaker, having Walker Kessler as a lob option? LeBron has always excelled at the lob game. We've seen it throughout his entire career, the perfectly timed, perfectly weighted passes that find their target right at the basket. Kessler catching lobs and finishing is not a stretch. It's not a hopeful projection. It's a natural, obvious fit. Now let's address the concerns. Because this is a fair and balanced examination of this trade, and there are people who have raised questions. And those questions deserve to be acknowledged and addressed. The first concern some people raise is, can Kessler stay healthy? Can he hold up over the course of an 82-game season and the additional physical demands of a playoff run? This is a fair question for any big man in the NBA. The center position is demanding. The contact is constant. The wear and tear accumulates. Here's the counter to that concern. Kessler, in his time in Utah, has shown reasonable durability. He's not been a player who's spent extended time on the injury report. His body type, tall, long, with a frame that can handle contact, is not inherently fragile. And frankly, in the right system, with the right sports medicine staff, with the load management that championship-caliber organizations provide, the injury concern is manageable. The second concern: can he contribute offensively enough to play meaningful minutes against elite playoff competition? The worry is that a player who is primarily a defensive center might struggle against sophisticated playoff offenses that will try to expose him on the other end. They'll put him in pick-and-pop situations. They'll try to drag him out to the perimeter. They'll try to make him guard players he's not comfortable guarding. This is a real concern, and it deserves a real answer. The honest answer is, every great rim-protecting center has faced this challenge. Every single one. The answer is not that you pretend the concern doesn't exist. The answer is that you build your offensive sets in a way that minimizes his exposure. You keep him in situations where he can be effective. You don't ask him to be something he's not. You use him in the pick and roll, you use him in short roll situations, you use him in transition. And in the half court, you make sure that the defensive burden his presence removes from your team is worth more than the offensive limitations you have to manage. The numbers, and the history of great defensive centers in championship runs, say yes. It is worth it. The defensive value outweighs the offensive limitation when the defensive value is genuine, elite-level impact, which Kessler's is. The third concern: does this fit financially? Does it work under the salary cap? Does it create problems for future roster construction? This is where the business of basketball gets genuinely complicated, and I don't want to pretend I have a simple answer. Cap management in the modern NBA is a labyrinthine puzzle that the smartest people in basketball spend their entire professional lives trying to solve. What I can say is that the Lakers front office, and this is a front office that has shown, when operating at its best, the capacity to make sophisticated, multi-layered decisions about roster construction, clearly made a determination that the value of adding Kessler outweighs any financial complications the deal creates. And given what they're getting, that's not a hard argument to make. Let's zoom out. Let's look at the big picture for a moment. Let's look at what this trade says about where the Lakers are as an organization. The Lakers, for most of their history, have been one of the premier organizations in professional basketball. They've had more Hall of Famers wear their jersey than almost any other franchise. They've won championships in different eras, with different players, with different styles. They've been relevant when they had no business being relevant, and they've found ways to attract stars when other franchises couldn't. But there have been chapters in recent years, not the LeBron chapter, but surrounding chapters, where the organizational decision-making looked shaky, where the process was unclear, where the strategy seemed muddled. And fans, understandably, got frustrated. Because when you're the Lakers, when you have that history and that standard, anything less than genuine championship-level competence in the front office is unacceptable. This trade looks like the Lakers operating at a high level. This trade looks like identifying a genuine need, finding the right player to fill it, and making the deal happen. This looks like a front office that knows what it's doing. And for Lakers fans who have been through some turbulent times, that is genuinely reassuring. Let's go back to Walker Kessler, the person, for a moment. Because in all of this strategic and analytical discussion, it's easy to forget that we're talking about a human being. A young man who grew up dreaming of playing in the NBA, who worked for years to develop his skills, who made it to the highest level of the sport and has established himself as one of the better players at his position. Kessler's story is in many ways a classic basketball story. He wasn't a super recruit who everyone was talking about from age 14. He wasn't the consensus #1 pick who had his own documentary before he ever played a professional game. He was a player who developed, who grew, who worked on his craft, who found his way to the NBA and then continued developing once he got there. He's a player whose best basketball is still ahead of him. And now he's going to Los Angeles. Now he's going to be part of one of the most storied, scrutinized, celebrated franchises in sports history. He's going to play alongside a living legend in LeBron James and A.